Civil War Roundtable. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we're going to learn about the Tennessee State Capitol. Our speaker today is Jeff Sellers, who is from the Tennessee State Museum. So we'll get started here in just a few minutes. Thank you all so much for tuning in.
No, he's already left up now. He's good. Thank you.
Making sure it works. Making sure it works. Not the original. We own a print of it. The original's in the Library of Congress.
You can digitally fix all those cracks.
Yeah. I kind of like the cracks. It kind of gives a little bit of, but yeah.
Is that looking towards the northeast?
This is facing the this is facing the eastern side of the building from the southeast. Yeah, that way. You're looking northwest.
Alrighty, how's everybody doing today? Everybody doing great? That's awesome. Thank you all so much for coming out to the Franklin Civil War Roundtable. We're very excited to have our speaker here today. Is anybody visiting with us today that is not a member of the Franklin Civil War Roundtable? Raise your hand. Everybody? Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Okay, get out. Just kidding.
I'm not either, so you and I can go.
If you're not a member, please feel free to become a member. That's not a problem at all, but thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciate that. So we'll go ahead and get started. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Jeff Williams. I recently took over the Franklin Civil War Roundtable from Greg, so very grateful again for everything he has done. I'm very excited to have you guys come out and support us. The last one we did was with our curator Joanna, who talked about the new visitor center at the Carter House. We had some folks show up. We really appreciated that. Dan Masters was here before that. I cannot tell you how impressed he was with the people that showed up. He said he felt very welcome, great conversations with a lot of the visitors. So thank you all again so much for coming out and supporting. I'm going to introduce our speaker today. His name is Jeff Sellers, so there's another Jeff in the world. He is the Director of Education and Public Programs at the Tennessee State Museum and State Capitol. He holds master's degrees in education as well as public history from Middle Tennessee State University, go Blue Raiders, and began his history career as an interpretive ranger at Stones River National Battlefield. Soon after, he joined the museum, where he has served as a museum educator and managed tours of the Capitol for 20 years in September. Sellers has written extensively on Tennessee history, as well as assisted on countless exhibits, public programs, and school programs throughout his career. He has led tours at the Capitol for dignitaries around the world, as well as school and civic groups from all over the state. His latest book, The Tennessee State Capitol, explores the photographic history of our beloved National Historic Landmark and is published by Arcadia Publishing Company. It is now available at your local bookseller. We do have some copies right over here on the table if you want to pick one up. They can bring it up for you in the gift shop. I'm sure that Mr. Sellers would love to sign it for you. Now, that is exactly what he told me to say about him.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.
So, I'd like to give my personal remarks. I met Mr. Sellers. I attended Vol State University right out of high school, and he was an adjunct professor for American History Survey class. I cannot express to you how transformative that class was for me. The project that we had to work on is we had to visit historic sites, and we didn't write a report about the history we learned there. We had to analyze the interpretation, the museum gallery space, the park rangers, the historic tour guides, and it got me to look at historic sites in a very different way. And I knew at that moment I wanted to be in public history. So I have been very fortunate to have Mr. Sellers as a mentor since I met him the first time. And whether he likes it or not, I consider him a friend. So,
I love it. I love it.
Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Sellers.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. You know, I'll continue this love fest between the two Jeffs here. In that class, I remember that class very well. There was one bright spot in that class, and it was a young man sitting right in the front row, and he and I just hit it off. I knew that kid right there, and now he's a great local and very respected historian among our field, and I am so happy that he landed here at this historic site. And you guys are very fortunate to have a leader such as Jeff to help you with the programming of this wonderful and very respected roundtable group. So yeah, and I just want to say thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the Battle of Franklin Trust for having me. It is indeed an honor to get to share the history of your state capitol. That's kind of always my thing is I want to make sure that it is your building, and you understand that the state capitol and its history belongs to all of us as Tennesseans. And y'all, it is a fascinating building. It is a National Historic Landmark, not just for the things that we'll talk about today, but all of the different legislation that has gone on up there. I know sometimes the two parties can make things ugly, but it is a fabulous place to work and a wonderful history to share with you. So I'm going to spend about 3 to 4 hours today talking about the Capitol. I'm kidding. I'm just making sure I have your attention at the outset. No, we'll spend a few minutes and go through some really cool photographs. And when Jeff kind of came to me and said, hey, you know, your book is out, would you like to do a talk? And I said, yes, I'd love to do one on your book. And I've done several book talks since the book has come out. But I said, you know, this group right here might just be interested in if we just zeroed in on chapter 2 and just kind of parked in the Civil War at the Capitol. Because this is an area of the history of the building that I need myself to really figure out. And this has allowed me and helped me to do that. So I hope that in the few minutes we'll have together, we'll all kind of learn a thing or two as we map out just what the heck happened from 1861 to 1865 in the first Confederate capital to fall into the Union hands and what that meant. And I can tell you sort of my message of this time together is that just as the war evolved, the state capitol and its use evolved. And we'll walk through each of those different kind of things that go on at the Capitol and really park in photography, because we're very, very fortunate that our Capitol was completed at the same time photography was really beginning to blossom and really become online. And this Capitol building is just as photogenic as you can see there in our heading image here. So we'll go through a few slides, and then I'll be happy to answer questions along the way. Sound good? All right. Let's take our journey into the Capitol. Here is a similar scene, not so similar, but similar vantage point. This is the Capitol building. This is actually the very first image of the Capitol ever. This was commissioned by William Strickland, our architect, many of you know that name, to sell his idea for the Capitol. It will be a long and arduous construction process. Here is Strickland, moves to Nashville in 1845. Will set the cornerstone of our building in July of that year. And then this is printed in 1846. He wants to stir excitement about this Capitol. This will be the most impressive building, he would say to the General Assembly. This will be the most impressive building west of the Appalachian Mountains. And indeed, when it is finished, 14 years after construction, he executes this building that way. He will not see the completion of it. He will die in 1854, but this man, who you may or may not know, Samuel Morgan, will see it to its full completion. 14 years from 1845 until the final flagstones are laid down on the terrace in March of 1859. I love this portrait of Samuel Morgan. You don't often see the cigar. And you certainly don't see the cigar smoking, do you? But it is a wonderful photograph of him in his early 40s when he took over as the building commissioner of our Capitol building. So I just kind of set the precedent there. To benchmark our time frame, 1859, this Capitol is completed, but not so much completed. Because as you saw in this picture, there's still a lot of work to be done, right? There's a lot of work to be done. The grounds had not yet been attempted when the drums of war in 1860, an election of 1860, and then, of course, the secession crisis of early 61 comes along. And then this building is thrown into that process. Of course, you all know the history of Tennessee and secession, but if you think about it, in 1860, they were working on the grounds of the Capitol, but quickly, much of the historical evidence shuts off. They do not talk about budgeting or appropriations towards the grounds. They focus on the upcoming crisis and what's happening in the larger picture. Before I get into our Confederate $20 bill here, think about the secession crisis itself. The two special sessions that Governor Isham Harris calls of the General Assembly and the two referendum votes taken in the winter and spring and summer of 1861 are all held. Those special sessions are held at the Capitol, in the House chamber and in the Senate chamber. Isham Harris will deliver a speech asking, after the firing on Fort Sumter, asking the General Assembly to secede from the Union. So the gravity of these issues in this time really is the heart and center. This is the location that all of that is happening. Now, the Confederate $20 bill is ubiquitous. Many of you probably know this bill very well. There were 10 million of these printed. Why would they put the Confederate 20 on it? I'm sorry, why would they put the Tennessee Capitol on the Confederate 20? Well, largely because this shows the modern, this is a modern nation, and that it can have grand architecture, and they're trying to do their best to convince the world of the Confederacy's legitimacy here with this Confederate 20. The state capitol, our state capitol, joins the only other two state capitals to be printed on any sort of Confederate money, South Carolina and Virginia. Those three state capitals are the only ones. Now, the irony of the Confederate 20, does anyone know? What's that?
The capital was in Union hands.
That's absolutely right. The Capitol fell in February of 1862. You all know these dates as well. This is printed in October of that year. Confederates in Nashville probably never saw this bill or used this bill or touched this bill until after the war. Maybe that might be why there's so many still out there today. You can buy them fairly easily. But nonetheless, this gives an idea of the pride that the Confederacy would have had in this structure. It was also offered as the capital of the Confederacy. Of course, everyone seeing its tenuous position way into the upper South saw that was probably not the best idea. So it never really had a chance at becoming the Confederate capital, but it certainly was proposed to be. Of course, in February of 1862, this Confederate capital will be the first to fall. After the fall of Fort Donelson, it really opens the way. The Confederates leave Nashville, and the Great Panic ensues. March 4th, 1862, you have the first dress parade on the public square. This is a lithograph of that parade. And notice in the background there, you see our Capitol there. The lithographer made sure he did not put the rooftop onto it so that you could see that this Confederate capital was in the hands of the Union Army here. This is the 51st Regiment of the Ohio Volunteer Infantry here. This is the public square of Nashville. Many of you know the Old Glory story, but let me tell you, when you tell this story to visitors of the Capitol from tourists all over the country, boy, they love to hear it. This story really gets them. If you don't know it, this man right here is Captain William Driver. He is a Massachusetts man through and through from Salem, Massachusetts, and he is circumnavigated in his merchant marine ship, the World. And on that ship, he had carried with him throughout his long naval career his flag. This is it, that he had nicknamed for himself. His mother had sewn it when he gained his commission as captain, and he will sail with Old Glory all over the world. He will move to Nashville, landlocked Nashville, Tennessee. Can you imagine that? Someone who's sailed the open seas all their life, coming in the only body of water is the Cumberland River. Of course, you know, he threads a long string across the road south of Broadway where his house was, and he displays Old Glory on 2 occasions, one 4th of July and 2 St. Patrick's Day. Why St. Patrick's Day? It was his birthday. It was his birthday. But he loved, you could see the pride he had in that. You could see he was a strong and staunch Unionist, and he despised the Confederacy and the secessionists. And so he becomes one of the leaders of the Unionists in Nashville. When they do take it over, before he does that, on 2 occasions, people come to confiscate the flag and take it away. They know he has this flag. He hides it, sews it in a quilt, hides it across the street at a neighbor's house. And when the Confederates, or when the Union Army approaches, he will break it out into the open, and he goes up to Capitol Hill, where the 6th Ohio is here. They are the first to set foot off the gunboats and steamboats and march up to Capitol Hill, and they raise their small little regimental U.S. flag, and he says, no, that will never do. He offers Old Glory, a ship's flag. This is a huge flag, and it will fly proudly over the state capitol on that day. And of course, that nickname for his flag becomes the nickname for our flag, and kind of grows and grows and grows in legend until that's what we call our United States flag today, is Old Glory. This is it in 1912. This is his daughter and son-in-law. They're living in Utah right here, and she will eventually donate it to the Smithsonian. Does anybody remember back in 2006 when it came back to the back to Nashville? You remember? Of course you do, Jeff. It came back in 2006. I was very early in my career at the State Museum and had the honor of being there when it was displayed. And that was the last time it will ever travel again, just simply because it was so fragile. So the Smithsonian said, Nashville, you're the only city that's going to get this thing, and so they gave it to us and let us display it. This is a sketch of Nashville, and the reason I put it in the book is it just gives you an idea of how Nashville, little sleepy Nashville, was transformed. Think about March of 1862. We're a month away from Shiloh. Buell's army of the Ohio is coming down, and Nashville is its headquarters. You all know what happens in Shiloh. He saves the day with this army that has been expanding and is being headquartered here in the city. And the city is set in all directions, is thousands and thousands and thousands of troops and soldiers. This is Edgefield, East Nashville today. I have a quote from an Indiana volunteer here. He says, I have no idea about the number of troops here, but can only say that every field and hillside for a circuit of 10 miles is white with tents. This is an idea of these troops just being all over the place. And they'll spend their free time as tourists going to the state capitol. One soldier, Robert Price, writes home, he says, the State House, standing on a fine mound 170 feet above the river, is the finest building I ever saw and is seen for miles around. And you can see what he's seeing right here, right? I mean, these guys are farmers from Indiana, from Michigan, from Ohio. They've never seen a 4-story, maybe a 3-story building. And then they see this huge stone monolith sitting on top of that on top of that hill. It must have been a very impressive scene to them. Also, when Buell comes along, another guy comes into town, and this is Andrew Johnson. Lincoln really wants civil government to be reestablished as quickly as possible. He will send the one loyal senator back home to Nashville as military governor. This is Andrew Johnson of Greenville. He's the only Southern senator that stood against secession, and Lincoln says, I want him in Nashville to reestablish civil government. Incidentally, Buell does not want any part of this. Buell wants to be in charge. He's a military guy. I'm in command. We don't need two opposing commands in the same city. Nonetheless, this is Lincoln and Stanton who put Johnson here. He arrives March 12th, 1862, and the very next day he arrives at the Capitol. It will begin to be fortified, not necessarily in the beginning. All of Nashville is very wide open at this point. There is no Fort Negley, there's no Morton, there's no casino, there's nothing like that around until something happens in the summer of 1862, and that is Forrest's raid into Middle Tennessee, and of course he recaptures Murfreesboro. You have Morgan going around and up into Kentucky. Now you have cavalry in the back of Buell in Nashville. You have Forrest 30 miles away. This excites the pro-Confederate Nashville. They think they're going to be redeemed and kick the Union Army out of Nashville. It scares Johnson and probably Captain Driver and all of the other Unionists in town, because they think it becomes this kind of very much rumors and they're on the outskirts of town. There's a big battle that's going to take place any moment. But what it does is it shows how vulnerable Nashville is to recapture. And so Johnson will, and Buell will begin the process of fortifying Nashville. And over the war, this Nashville will become the second most fortified city other than Washington, D.C. These are just some examples of those forts here. He will charge James St. Clair Morton, the chief engineer of the Army of the Ohio, to fortify the city. And he commands him to devise some defenses also around the capital. It's kind of like, and do the capital as well. The reason for that is Buell didn't think it was all that necessary to fortify the capital, but Johnson does. And Johnson's worried about it, and Johnson's writing back and forth to Stanton. Nonetheless, he gets his fortifications, and this is a sketch of the Capitol's grounds. This is the east side, this is the west, the south, and the north side here. You can see this says earth parapet here, and you have stockades here all along the side here. So this is going to be the fortified Fort Andrew Johnson, which was kind of the nickname of the Capitol during the war. This is what it looked like in real life. One of the things I've sort of nerded out on in this book process is I wanted to find the first photograph of the Capitol. And as you might imagine, it's kind of not easy to do. I think this image right here has a good shot at being the earliest image of the Capitol. There is no known image before the Civil War. There is no known image before fortification, which came along in August of 1862. But this one stands a good chance, I think. Many photographers were in the city prior to wartime photography. These are some of them. A.S. Morris, T.M. Schleier, and C.C. Gears were some of the more prominent of that era. I love this photo, though. Look at all of these stone blocks. Now you think, well, what are those doing? I thought the building was completed. Those are for the grounds and for the retaining wall along Charlotte Avenue or Cedar Street. Today is MLK Boulevard. Notice the Sibley tents here on the grounds. Notice the cotton bales also. This is unique only to this image. All the other pictures of the Capitol building, you do not see these cotton bales. I think these might have been done in the hysteria of thinking Nashville is going to be attacked again. Johnson said, if they attack, we will take this city down to rubble. So this idea of, kind of fine, soft gloves approach to the Capitol, or approach to cities early in the war, there are some bitter feelings, even in 1862, that says we will destroy the Capitol before we allow the Confederates to take it back, and we'll take the city down to rubble if it does. So this is war, and it's very serious. Here's some other early wartime photography. I think these are also predate the military photography that we'll get into in a minute. This is T.M. Schleier's, and Jeff, you and I were talking about this, but this is CDVs. These became souvenirs for soldiers to send back home to mom and dad, back home to their farms in the north. Look at this building. At first you think, oh, that's the same image. It's not. It's just a very different kind of, it's from the same vantage point here. This is taken in when this tree is leafed out, and of course this one is taken during the winter time, but it just shows you how popular photography was becoming of the era. Notice these stockades. Remember the fortifications here? These are cedar logs, and these are all kind of put around the steps. So you would not have been able to come up to the approaches here. And this is the earthen parapet that was located on the west side and the east side. This is the west side of the building here. This is the south side of the building. This is a Frank Leslie's illustrated kind of depiction of the Capitol ground of the Capitol. This is the west side facing northwest here, and you see the big, beautiful ornamental lamps. These were done by Wood and Perot out of Philadelphia, but they were on all sides of the building. But it gives you a good vantage point. And see way off in the distance here, This is probably Fort Gillem, and many of you know that Fort Gillem was also an area where the freed African Americans came in and sought refuge. They set up a camp there. Many of them were impressed into service of the Capitol. In fact, it's important to note that the construction, these stockades, these were done mostly by impressed African Americans, both enslaved and those that had run away and were free. And it's interesting to see, this is August of 1862, and there's communication back and forth in the official records where in August they said, oh, well, there's no endless amount of labor that we can find. And then once they're allowed to become soldiers and enlist in the military, that labor sort of dries up, and they can't get any much labor. But you also begin to see the first times in which they say, what the heck do we do with these guys? They need to be paid. They have families, and the families are starving. There's privations that they're undergoing. So you see the first pleas to Washington to say, we got to do something. We got to pay these guys for the labor that they're doing on the Capitol and other fortifications around Nashville. In 1864, this is the most important photographer to come to Nashville, really to the Western Theater. He's a household name for many people who love Civil War photography. It's George Barnard. And this is, in many ways, this is the Matthew Brady of the West. And he actually served and kind of became a partner with Brady and Gardner in Washington early in the war. And we'll get an appointment to become Sherman's military photographer of the Division of Mississippi here in Nashville and then point south. So he's going to follow Sherman all the way to the March to the Sea. His first starting spot is Nashville, and he lands here. Look at this photo on the left. I love it. This is probably my favorite photo of all of Gardner's. It shows the sun beaming down, glistening on the limestone steps of the state capitol. You have this lone sentinel out here, standing post. You can see the earthworks. You can see where they have taken their steps over and over and over there. You can see the tents there. You can see guys lounging on the eastern portico of the Capitol building. And then in the distance, you see Strickland's other building in Nashville. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, that's the Downtown Presbyterian Church, at the time known as First Presbyterian Church. Anybody know what this one is? That's McKendree Methodist Church. Both of those churches are still active and still holding church there even today. So two very historic churches. And then you have the Masonic Hall, which of course is no longer here, but was the largest, tallest building other than the Capitol in Nashville. And then this one here is, what's that?
University of Nashville.
That's a good guess. The University of Nashville is actually up here on these hilltops right here, down low on College Street, which is 3rd Avenue. Maxwell House Hotel. Yeah, Maxwell House Hotel. It is unfinished at this time, but is being used at different points as a hospital as well as a prisoner of war camp there for Confederate soldiers. Again, you see the cedar barriers here. You also see the battery of cannon that is in place on the east grounds. And again, these are not just for show. This is if the Confederates come in, they will be fired upon. This is the title image, and I just pause here just to show this and explain it here. I was telling a little bit earlier, this is facing northwest. So this is the corner of what is Charlotte Avenue, today MLK Boulevard. This is at the time Cedar Street. And down here would be Fifth Avenue, John Lewis Way today, facing the east here. Incidentally, this little house here, before the Capitol was built, Judge George Washington Campbell had his house on this hilltop. And he's the one who sold this hilltop to the city of Nashville so that they could offer it to the state of Tennessee. This was his kitchen house. What happened to his house? He dismantled it brick by brick by brick and then rebuilt it just across the street, Cedar Street, where he lived until his death. And then his daughter, Lysinka Brown, will inherit that house. She is a pro-Confederate, and she will escape south. And Governor Johnson, military Governor Johnson, will stay in his house as the governor's mansion for the Capitol building. So, but this is the little kitchen house, probably used as a headquarter, some offices during the war. Again, beautiful images. Here you can see this is the south steps. Again, very interesting look at these stockades here. You'll see more of that. There's the kitchen house, a little different angle. Here's a guy, probably one of Gardner's assistants here in the Barnard assistants to give a little bit of context to the image. Way off in the background here is the public square of Nashville. Here's the Davidson County Courthouse, built by William Strickland's son Francis, patterned very much off of the plans of the Capitol building, no longer there, of course. And then these two twin towers right here are the farmers market of Nashville. And it had a shed, you can't really see it here, a shed that connected these two twin buildings. This is the opposite angle. After a storm, you can see the wet limestone here, terrace, the south steps. Now instead of facing east, we're facing southwest. So 12th South and all of this area here, Vanderbilt, all of that is over in this direction here. Let me just quickly talk about this. This is Wood and Perot's statues. This is called Morning, Noon, and Night. They were bought in 1856 by Samuel Morgan. Wood and Perot gave them a deal. I won't go into it all. But obviously, some of them, even early on, some of the legislators did not like these statues. You might imagine they're sort of scantily clothed. Even the guys doesn't have much clothes on. But Noon, he's holding a torch. That's Noon. See the lady covering her head, or the veil over her head? That's Night. And then you can't see her here, but she has an oil lamp right here. That's Morning. So Morning, Noon, and Night was the name of these statues. And you'll see them all the way up into the 1950s in photographs of the Capitol. I love this photograph too. This is the east steps that we just saw, but a better vantage point of this battery of guns right here. Again, standing point on the east steps of the Capitol, facing north. Bicentennial Mall, this area here today. Another image of the west steps, and notice the lone guy out here giving some more context. There's a guy right there. But this is the Supreme Court building is here today. But what I love about this image, and these wet plate negatives are just, you can zoom in on them so great, and you can just see everything. I wish I could do it with y'all today, because if we went and did this right here, you could see Fort Negley standing on the hilltop there, St. Cloud Hill. This is 1864. So this is getting pretty late in the war, but this is before Barnard leaves for Chattanooga. Also, I love pointing this out to folks today, and if y'all come to the Capitol and take a tour with me, I'll show it to you. See this distinctive little piece of limestone with the waves in it? It's still there. So you can stand where the photographer set up his tripod, and you can get the same vantage point taken off of this line and see everything and how Nashville has changed there. That's one of those areas I love to geek out about. So come to the Capitol, and I'll show you that we'll spend some time up there. This is the north vantage point. All of these are Barnard photographs too, by the way. Notice the rifle holes here that you could have infantry shooting out of these rifle holes of the stockade. Again, morning, noon, and night on the north side. A lone little tent right here in the foreground. And then look at the plain the Bicentennial Mall area is today here. This is a huge floodplain. You got the Cumberland River right here, and all of this floods. So much so that in 2010, remember our big flood of 2010? I was working at the Capitol that day, and all of this was flooded out here, all the way to what is 8th Avenue or Rosa Parks Boulevard today. Also, you get a sense, too, in occupied Nashville, these soldiers looking for something to do in all of the boredom played a game. Our first game of baseball was played on these flatlands here, out here in today. Very appropriately, we're still playing baseball in this same area, even Sulphurdale and on now to the First Horizon Park. So we've been playing baseball here in Nashville right here since, it's probably the summer of 1862. Oh, also, look at the train bridge. When you go to Bicentennial Mall, that same rail line is still passing through that area. So and you can see it's up on posts here to keep it off of the floodplain there. This is a very famous photograph of Nashville, and it's taken from the hilltop of the state capitol, and it is facing probably west to northwest, and it's likely that these folks are standing listening to the booming of cannon from the Battle of Nashville, December of 1864. They're all gathered there, and you see a lot of these stereo views will have that listed on there as well, that's what's happening in this photograph. So it's kind of interesting just to pause and look at this, and they're all looking off, they're all waiting very probably anxiously to see what's going on. But you can just imagine the booming and it going from west to south and even off to the east. It would have been quite disconcerting for them and all Nashvillians. Obviously right here, this ground and the people that endured that. Also, the tower of our Capitol building, think about that. That is a perfect lookout. And during the Battle of Nashville, while these folks are here, Andrew Johnson and officers are up in the cupola of the Capitol Tower, looking south and seeing what's going on out there. And in that time, you could have seen way far and probably gotten close to seeing what was going on down at the battleground. Let's go quickly to, and I only have a few more slides, but the Capitol also becomes a meeting place. It's not just a place for the military governor, but union clubs begin to very much pop up, and this is a union. The National Union Club held meetings there, and this is one here held in the Representatives Hall of the capital of Tennessee. Again, trying to pass ideas and coalesce people around rejoining the Union. During the Battle of Nashville, I forgot to mention, no, not the Battle of Nashville, but the lead up to the Battle of Nashville, as troops began to flood back into the city from Franklin, and then they began to flood back into fortified Nashville. The Capitol will serve as the barracks for soldiers as well. So you can think of that as the barracks ground in the Capitol building. Also, after the Battle of Stones River in January of 1863, every major building, especially public building, was a hospital. Every one of them, including the Capitol building. And it said that 60 to 70 soldiers a day were dying in the immediate aftermath of the Battle of Stones River, the bloody battle there, and many of them also here in the state capitol. So it served as a hospital, it served as a Union Army barracks, as well as a meeting house, as well as a civil government capital, again, military capital. And this is an image of the Capitol, which I believe to be after the war. In January of 1865, Brownlow and East Tennesseans and many Unionists will form the first convention that takes place to rejoin the United States. And they will, in that convention, which incidentally was supposed to be held in December, but had to be postponed because the Battle of Nashville was taking place, so they did it in January. But they will hold 2 elections in February and March, 2 new General Assembly special sessions in the Capitol, and they will in February pass the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery, and in March they will elect a legislature and they will elect Brownlow as governor. That's because Governor Johnson has now become vice president, and he will be inaugurated on the 4th with Lincoln. And of course, we know what happens in April 1865. Here at the Capitol, by May of 1865, the legislature is back. They've been voted in. Brownlow is back. And there really is no need for all of that fortification to be placed here. And you see the fortifications kind of still, earthworks are up here, but the cedar logs and the stockades have been taken down in this image. So I think this is one of the earliest post-Civil War images of the Capitol building. You also have the kitchen house, which will be dismantled in the late 1860s. So this is a pretty cool and significant image, I think. This church right here, that's St. Mary's of the Seven Sorrows. It's still there today. It's the oldest church in Nashville, 1848, Catholic congregation here. But yeah, good observation. This is just a quick timeline, and mainly I just kind of did it from my own understanding of the timeline. But it does show you the evolution of the Capitol from a Confederate capital to a fortification, Fort Andrew Johnson in 1862, to a hospital in 1863, to a meeting house in the summer of 1863, and then Union Army barracks in the lead up to Hood's invasion, and finally, once again, the capital of the state of Tennessee, back in state control. And y'all, our state capital is one of very few capitals that is an antebellum capital, number one. Number two, it's still a working capital. So our governor's still there, our legislature's still there, and our Supreme Court's just across the street. Most old state capitals are not that way. They are now museums, they're now historic sites. Ours still is the seat of government. And it has been that for these, except in its entire existence, these few years when it wasn't. But in 1865, that was reestablished. And from that moment to this moment, it still serves as our seat of government. So I think that's pretty cool that we have that with our capital. Let me quickly show you 3 other images. It's not just about the Civil War. There's 7 chapters in the book. This is one of my favorite pictures of all the Capitol, and this is it in 1880. Anybody know what's going on here? This is the unveiling of the Jackson equestrian statue. Remember morning, noon, and night? There they go. During the remodeling and restoration of the Capitol in the 1950s, everything was meticulously tried to be kept historical preservation and integrity, except these. The 1950s sensibilities did not like the scantily clad people on the Capitol grounds, so they're gone. This is the top of the tower. And then, because this is a Civil War roundtable, I ended it with this slide. 1905, former Confederate general and former Tennessee Governor William B. Bate was buried or had his funeral at the Capitol in 1905. But the point of this being, it's our house. This is the people's house. It's not just the seat of government. It's where we collectively celebrate the ends of wars. We mourn state funerals. So it's our house. It belongs to all of us. Thank you, guys, and I hope that you enjoyed the presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
If y'all do have a question, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll get you a microphone when you can ask the questions, and Jeff can answer. Are there any questions? There's no way he's this good. Come on.
I'm scared of some of these great questions that I might get, though. That's
Softball question.
yeah, I like those.
Discuss the tombs within the Capitol.
Thank you for pointing that out. Absolutely. The two guys that I first showed you, remember the cigar-toting Samuel Morgan and William Strickland, the architect? Strickland was buried there in 1854. When he passed away, he slumped over on the steps of the U.S. Post Office downtown Nashville and died unexpectedly. A few weeks prior to that, he had asked the General Assembly if he could be buried at the Capitol building. Very serendipitously, he did that, and he drew out his tomb. And about 6 weeks later, he was dead and in that tomb. And then Samuel Morgan, of course, dies in 1880. And they'll bury him honorarily because Strickland got that honor. They'll bury the commissioner in the building as well in the south. Strickland's in the north portico. Morgan is in the south. Great question. Thank you for pointing that out.
Any other questions? Did you have one?
What happens at morning, noon, and night?
What happened? What happened to morning, noon, and night? That is the perpetual question. People, woof. There's been some Facebook posts about morning, noon, and night. They went to the scrap heap with all the other rubble of the Capitol building. Now, where's that scrap heap? Well, it's believed that most of that rubble was taken out to Ellington Agricultural Center. If you know where that is, it's in South Nashville, but it's state-held land. I keep telling some of the government officials, I'm like, we really need to get some ground-penetrating radar out there and find those things. But I will say, one of them was saved. A senator in the 1950s saw what you just saw and said, are those going to the scrap? Yeah. Well, I'm going to take one. And he took one back to his farm, and there it stands to this day. You can look it up. She's called the Lady of the Falls. She's down around Tullahoma. And you can Google her, and she's still there. She's giving lots of people joy who go and visit her at this beautiful waterfall area. So, good question about morning, noon, and night.
Any other questions?
Could you talk a little bit about the ratification of the 14th Amendment? I vaguely remember the last time I toured the Capitol several years ago. There's some story.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about
And
that.
I'll repeat the question.
Could you talk a little bit about the ratification of the 14th Amendment in Tennessee and the context behind? I think there's some kind of conflict in the state capitol and some U.S. Marshals. Is that true? I'm sorry, I can't remember the story,
Yes.
but just wanted to know if
Yes.
you could kind of expound
Do
upon
you
that a little bit.
understand what you're asking? That's a whole nother hour of this presentation. If you only understood, my staff and I, they go, we go back and forth on this. That is one of the biggest mysteries of the Capitol building. What happened during the ratification of not the 13th, we just talked about that, but the 14th. If you remember, the 14th is probably one of the most important amendments, still argued about even today, but it defined citizenship, and particularly at that time for African Americans freed, and defined citizenship in the 14th Amendment. 1866, July of 1866, I'll give you the quick Reader's Digest version. July of 1866, Brownlow wants nothing more than to see Tennessee return to the Union where it belongs. Confederates do not have votes. They are not they are out of the equation. We're only dealing with East Tennessee radical Republican Unionists and the more conservative Unionists, largely many of them here in Middle Tennessee. They're the ones in control in the House and Senate. We got to pass the 14th Amendment. The House members, those conservatives, do not want to see the 14th passed. They do not like it, and they will try to prevent a quorum, meaning they will simply not show up for the vote. Brownlow, and so they don't. Brownlow the governor has called a special session. We all know about that. Everyone has to come in and focus only on whatever this special session is about. In this case, the 14th Amendment. These guys come to Nashville and then just leave. Some of them hide out in Nashville. Others go back to Jackson County, and one goes all the way to Carter County. You guys know where Carter County is. It's way, way out in East Tennessee. Brownlow charges the sergeant-at-arms, who is an officer, to go arrest these men. And he does. He gets on rail lines and goes all the way out to Carter County and Jackson County and arrests these legislators and returns them to the Capitol building. He holds them there in one of the clerk's offices that adjoins the House chamber. If you go to the House chamber, you can still see those offices. They're right there. And he locks them in those offices. And whenever they come up to the point where they're calling roll to try to get a quorum, is Representative Martin here? Not present. Present. He's present. He's checked in. So they get a quorum by having those guys, even though they say, I'm not here. I'm officially not here. They're here. Brownlow, they're doing everything to ram this thing through. These guys are lawyers. They know what the deal is here. So they go and they ask for a court judge in Davidson County, criminal court judge, circuit court judge, to issue a writ of habeas corpus. They're being arrested and held against their will without being charged of a crime. The judge sees their plight and says, yep, I agree. These guys have to be let out. You can't hold them up there. Brownlow and the speaker say, excuse me, this is the state of Tennessee. You're a municipal judge. And there becomes this state versus city thing. I'm sure we don't hear anything about state versus city today, but back then it was a thing. Nonetheless, he orders the sheriff of Davidson County to get a posse of men together and ride up to Capitol Hill. And the sheriff of Davidson County, by the way, they've locked the doors of the Capitol now, and it's after hours, it's at nighttime, and they knock on the door and say, are you still holding these guys? Yes, they're in here, but it's closed right now. No, it's not. Open up, open up. And this posse breaks the windows to some of the windows of the first floor and climbs through the windows. And an altercation ensues up on the second floor in the House chamber, but they demand the release of these men. One of those men leaves with the posse. The other man is said to be asleep and not easily awoken from maybe some of the things he had been partaking in his chamber. So he could not be woken up to leave. But in that altercation, these are Union soldiers, and these are armed men. There is said to be a shot that is fired on the steps of the Capitol building, and it's still there today. There's a chip in the marble that took place in that era. But prior to the posse coming up, they had the votes. Those guys were present, and the 14th Amendment had already passed that day, making Tennessee the first Confederate state to rejoin the United States. It was the last to leave, as we all know, and the first to rejoin. That's how it rejoined at the state capitol. So, yes, that's one of my favorite stories, and I get eye rolls from my staff anytime I tell, I go off of that story.
Question, was the State House also the scene of the last
state to vote for women's suffrage?
What's that now? Say,
Was the State House the scene of the last major vote for women's suffrage?
yes. And in fact, that is probably mostly why the Capitol building is a National Historic Landmark, because it was the 36th state capitol to ratify, state legislature, ratify the 19th Amendment, which of course we know is 3/4 majority, passes this constitutional amendment. And boy, we really brag about that at the state capitol on these tours and stuff. I had a woman from Minnesota one time really put me in my place and said, wait a minute, you're bragging about being the last? I was like, okay, well, you got me. And she was like, we were one of the first to give women the right to vote. And I'm like, well, I guess so. But we still brag about it quite a lot. And of course, you all know Harry Byrne, young 24-year-old representative from Nyota, Tennessee. What did he do? He received a letter from who? His mama, as we say in the South. And his mother had told him in that letter, and it's true, you can go look it up, to be a good boy and vote for suffrage. And he changed his vote from no to yes, and it really was his deciding vote that changed the entire course of that amendment. So, yeah, great story. Again, that's a whole, I could load that in the PowerPoint here, and we could go on and on.
Well, if y'all do want to pick up Jeff's book, we do have some of the copies over here on the table that can ring you up in the gift shop. I'm sure Mr. Sellers would be more than happy to sign it for you. Give him another round of applause, y'all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And thank y'all again so much for coming out. Be sure to come out for the next one and tell your friends about it. So y'all have a great time getting home. Be safe. Thank you so much. Hey, you're welcome.
My mother was big into architecture. We visited Philadelphia, and she took us to the William Strickland building that predates the Capitol. It has almost exact people.
Thank you all for watching.
It is, and that's
tune
his
in next
first
month.
execution
We
of
will
that
do
cookbook.
another
That's the
stream
Purchase
of the
Exchange
Frequency
building.
Wartime.
Yeah, I've got a picture of it.
Yeah.
You look at it like, wow.
Yes.